Has your monthly payment on your mortgage gone up this year? Well, it's probably not what you think, and it has a lot to do with your insurance policy, which is why today I've got my good friend Levi Kastner with Kastner Insurance breaking down what's actually happening in the market and what you can do to mitigate the rise in costs on your insurance policy. All right, so Levi, I had to get you back. You're the first guest I've brought back in this year because there's so much noise about insurance and how it's affecting their, our clients' monthly payments. And it's been a lot of change in the last 12 months when it comes to insurance, and we're now starting to really see it impact our, the affordability of houses, and it's been a disruptor. People are getting through it, and I wanted to get your take on what is happening, because we know that if you recently got a letter from your bank saying you didn't have enough money in your escrows and you're now increasing your monthly payment to really to fix that delta from what your escrow was to where it is now. Some people think that it was their mortgage payments going up, but it's really their escrows. But thank you for being here. Let's dive in. Tell me what is going on in the insurance world here in Louisiana.
So basically increases, you're going to get an increase. Home insurance, commercial insurance, you are going to see an increase. We are getting a lot of extra calls on people saying their escrow and stuff goes up. And it may be going up for the insurance cost. That may be a part of it. But, I say to those people, call your agent and you could actually work with them. What's really going on is and
to be fair, also property taxes have gone up for some of our clients too. So it's not all insurance.
No, it's not all insurance. And you have to really look at it. Like we were kind of discussing before we recorded this, is I got a call from somebody saying, hey, my escrow significantly increased. Their premium was say $1,500 and maybe going up to, I'm estimating $2,000. They're still going to be under what market rates are because they've had that policy in place for a couple of years. But what I think, and I'm not an expert on escrow and the laws around escrow, is based on what the banks are seeing through their pool of clients, they're saying, hey, your escrow is going to increase exponentially because this is what we're seeing. Now, I'm guessing that's what's happening in this case. But what people can do is to call their agents. What we're seeing a lot on home insurance renewals, depending on what company you're in, is they're significantly increasing the replacement cost on your home. And sometimes it's a little out of whack, so you can call in and maybe adjust that replacement cost with that insurance carrier, and you can make that call to your agent to try.
So it's the cost of materials and building construction has gone up, so now the insurance companies also, not only are the rates going up, but they're also trying to account for replacement cost value for those properties.
Right. I think it's a whole picture of what's going on with the markets, inflation, replacement cost of labor, all that stuff's going up. So they're trying to capture that in the insurance premium, right? And to be completely honest, a lot of people were underinsured when it came to the replacement cost on their houses. Insurance companies have requirements, co-insurance clauses that they have to meet with and follow, or else you can get a co-insurance penalty if you have a claim. So, but there are things you can do to try to adjust that replacement cost down to try to mitigate some premium increase.
Yeah, so knowing why it's going up is important, because we've talked, there are strategies, if you have a good insurance agent who really sees the whole picture, not just gives you the lowest rate, because there's lots of variables to that, but knowing and understanding what your risk or what you're willing to risk or your exposure based on not just the replacement value, but we've talked too is you could also potentially, if your bank is okay with it, just insure the amount of your mortgage in some cases.
Yeah, well, you still have to follow replacement costs, co-insurance clauses, but yeah, you could probably lower that sum to help out your mortgage. But the bigger thing is, it's impacting us in Louisiana, but you are seeing across the United States, agents complaining about extra insurance so it's what they call a hard market. The insurance is moving to what they call, just a cycle of the market, a hard market nationwide. It is a little bit more difficult for us here, but everybody is facing this because of what's going on
Well, let's talk about it. Like, what is going on? Why? Let's break it down. What's happening in Louisiana? What's happening across the country?
Well, I think the big thing are with the inflation, increased tight labor markets. A big thing for the insurance cost last year was Hurricane Ian. I think the projected losses for Hurricane Ian were around $60 to $70 billion just for Florida alone. So of course that's going to impact everything worldwide because insurance companies are paying out more on their catastrophe, their coverage and everything.
Right.
But there are hopefully some positives, especially for our market. Like if you're a realtor, you need to be proactive about your listing agreements. Like if it's an older house, I know you guys do pre-purchase inspections, but you should pre-purchase and have the inspector look at like, what is the roof age? How old is that water heater? How old is the plumbing, electrical? Does that stuff need to be upgraded? You need to paint a picture to the underwriter, like, hey, why should we take this risk? Especially if the house is older.
Right.
If the house is newer, it's not so much of an issue. I would say if the house is built before 2000, it's not so much of an issue. And also, if the house has an older roof, we're seeing a lot more what they call like a depreciated roof schedule. Well, where if the house has a roof that's 10 years or older, they're going to pay depreciated costs on that roof instead of replacement costs. So make sure your clients are like keeping big important documents like, hey, I've replaced the windows, I've replaced the roof, upgraded the plumbing, the water heater. Keep those receipts. I would say shove them all together in a nice pamphlet and upload them to MLS if you have an older house that's being listed with a pre-purchase inspection. So you're not having a bad, when you go to sell that house, everything's up front for the insurance.
There's no surprise.
Right.
It's just going to make it easier for the insurance company to give the.
So
now that's for like if you're selling a house, it always pays off to do that pre-listing inspection.
Right.
And just in general, we know that most buyers buy houses based on the way they feel at the time that they're seeing it for the first time. And if you're bringing up those issues up front, a lot of times they're willing to look past that. It's only when they find out problems after they've already fallen in love with the house and now they're in inspections and they're like, look, I didn't know this was this. But if you tell them, hey, the hot water heater's older, but it's working fine, by the time that they get in the inspections, they already knew that and it's not a deal killer. But we're talking about, new listings and buyers, but can a normal homeowner that, wants to mitigate some of those additional costs for insurance, can they do an inspection and provide that information to an adjuster to keep their insurance down?
I mean, if you're coming to me with all this information, I'm not playing a guessing game on how to quote this house. But because I could paint a better picture to the underwriter. It's going to go to pre-insurance verification or whatever, extra underwriting just because of the tight insurance market. So I think absolutely if you're doing these things, you're going to be more proactive in selling or buying. Like if you're a buyer's agent and you go to a house, I'd be looking at all this stuff. Like, are the trees trimmed back? Are the gutters clean? How does the roof look? And just looking at all these things and just letting the buyer know that these all might be potential issues. But everybody's got to be way more proactive in approaching insurance. And that goes personal and commercial side.
Well, when you say proactive, I mean, it seems like, some of the uninformed agents they wait too long to tell their clients to get insurance quotes, whereas that really needs to be happening in the first week of going under contract, really deciding like, hey, what are they going to need? What are those insurance quotes, so that during your due diligence period, you still have that ability. That's why the due diligence period is there, to make sure you can insure it, the house is in the condition it needs to be in, and you can afford the insurance.
100%. I would even go even further, saying if you're a buyer's agent and you have some clients that really like a house, having a relationship with an agent to get a quote ahead of time just to see what those costs are.
Right. And if you're a seller, making sure that if you're anywhere near, AE flood zone or lower, that you have a flood elevation certificate or something to show them that it's above base flood elevation or as close to it as you can, right? I mean,
yeah, completely agree. So if you're a listing agent, I would go into a listing appointment. Do they have a flood policy? Do they have an elevation certificate? Do they have their current, copies of their flood policy? It may be better to transfer that flood policy. I would do all that work up front, especially and throw it out there into the MLS or the market. Let the buyer's agents know, hey, this is an issue. we could transfer it, we could, get a new policy just to be proactive, especially on where it be.
And we're also seeing like insurance companies saying like they're giving less, that they have greater restrictions on roofs and whatnot, is what I'm hearing right now this year. I'm pretty surprised where they're starting to flag a roof when it's got 7 years of life left.
Yeah, 100%. So a lot of these companies, we'll go into this, but a lot of these companies in the incentive program, they're actually not writing policies on roofs that are older than 5 years. That means you can't get coverage with somebody else. They're just saying they're not writing new policies with roofs that are older than 5 years. 5 years isn't old, but like if you take a 3-tab roof in Louisiana, they say that's a 20-year roof.
Wait, they're not writing policies for what?
Like older roofs.
Yeah. You're saying 5 years and older?
On some of the programs.
Or 5 years left.
No, 5 years. So if the roof is older than 5 years, they're not even going to give you a quote.
Oh,
yeah, but that's just
because these incentive programs.
Well, that's just some of the companies in the program, because they're restricting new business. They have to put restrictions in place, right? And until hopefully the market improves a little bit. Hopefully the incentive program.
And hopefully we don't have another hurricane, which nobody...
Yeah, knock on wood.
Yeah.
But if we do, June 1 is right around the corner. People need to be proactive in making sure their house is good to go. Like if you have live oak, or trim your trees back off your roof, gutters are clean, everything you can do to be proactive to make sure your home is hurricane resilient as possible.
Yeah.
Within reason.
Well, let's talk about that, because they do have some new programs that most people haven't heard about, like the fortified homes and like being able to, qualify for that. What is the qualifications?
So I'm by no means an expert on the Fortified Home Program, but it is coming out, and it should be coming out pretty soon. But it says basically each person is going to be eligible up to $10,000 for the Fortified Home Program or Fortified Roof Program. We'll have some links that we could put that people can read about more.
We'll put some links about the Fortified Home Program on here, but let's go over what do you know about it, and like when is it already in place in other states?
It isn't. Well, I think yes, it is in place in other states like Florida and Alabama. Do a really good job of being proactive on their building codes and restrictions to make houses and buildings more hurricane resilient, and that's what this program is here to do. So I'll say, if you're a builder, you're doing new construction, there is some additional cost on doing
to make it fortified, because you're talking like when we're speaking of the fortified roof, it's thicker decking underneath the thing. Is correct, and then it's the way they're placing it on the actual house.
I think it's the decking and like the underlayment. They do they use ice and water shield instead of just a moisture barrier. Right? Ice and water shield, I believe itself is resilient to weather.
Right.
Now, there have been some complaints about builders saying our insurance companies, because it sticks to the OSB board on the roof, if you have to replace the roof due to shingles, it might tear up some of that OSB board. All the insurance company's going to pay to that.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really matter. At some point, people are, hey, it's my house. I'll pay the difference for the OSB board. You can't just rely on these insurance companies for everything, which is kind of...
Sure. Well, part of the problem is the additional expense to pay for those type of improvements on a house, are costly. So up until now, we hadn't seen, a real value in that in savings on an insurance. But now that insurance is, is going up so high, like anything we can make, if the cost justifies the savings on the insurance, now it's a wash. And so then there's value for the end customer to pay more for that, right? Because they're actually saving on that monthly.
So from what I don't know the specific numbers on it, but you can also there's the Louisiana Hurricane Loss Mitigation Survey form that contractors have to fill out while they're inspecting houses, that you can turn into the insurance company. I've heard of the insurance companies giving credits of 30 to 45% on the wind and hail portion because they're meeting the fortified roofing standards or fortified building standards. I really haven't seen it on anything we're doing.
Wind and hail is really the expensive part of the policy.
Exactly. Now, I haven't seen that myself on anything, but, I'm talking to other agents around the state, saying what's possible for once everything gets implemented with the program and what we're going to be able to see. So I've heard from builders that the cost of doing a fortified roof is maybe like 10 to 15% more for the roof. But if you're getting credit for it on the insurance, and at some point, I don't think it really matters because you're building a more, structure that's more hurricane resilient, and that's a big issue around here, right?
Yeah. It's interesting that you bring that up because, like, we hear it, especially with our older clientele. Like, we'll go into a house, and if you've been on a listing lately and you're an agent, you know what I'm talking about. You got the old guys that are like, well, every piece of this wall is hardwood and it's strong. And like, we got away from the value of that, the last decade and a half, 2 decades, where, the end user buyer really didn't care about how strong the house was. They just wanted to get in it. They just wanted to look good.
Yeah.
But now we're getting back to that where the stronger the house is, the lower, the more affordable it is because it's lowering some of the other costs. And it's interesting that we've seen that transition. Like, no kidding. Like, you go into anyone that was born in the, the 40s or 50s, and they built their house really, really well, but it's all behind the sheetrock and you can't see it.
Yeah.
The younger generations didn't see the value in that. And now it's kind of coming full circle back to, hey, it's important to have a strong house.
Yeah. Well, if you're building a new construction, I would say document it, like hanging, OSB board on the interior of a house. That's not a building requirement, but it's going to make a house better.
No doubt.
Right. And then you're sheetrocking it over there. Anything you can do to especially document it, especially I would say if you're building a new construction, document it, work with your builder.
Yeah.
The fortified home program.
It'd be interesting to see how much can you save and by building it at a higher standard. Like, it seems to me what we've been hearing is it's becoming more and more important where, almost essential in some cases.
Yeah.
Versus, hey, we're just saving money.
I think it's easier, like in the commercial space, to have those, to document those requirements and show those to an underwriter in the commercial space because it's still more of a very manual process. When it comes to home insurance, it's basically software. So unless the agent's going the extra mile to submit those documents to the underwriter to hopefully maybe get some credit on the premium, I don't think that market is there yet. I think it's going to come because I don't think we're going to have to have we're going to have an option to not do that anymore. So I think it's going to evolve into that, hopefully, is what I'm, hoping for. But it's not there yet, but I think it will get there. But if you're building a new structure, talk to your builder about a fortified home program. And I know builders are kind of complaining about it. I've heard some complaints, but still just at least have a conversation.
Well, I've talked to a lot of builders who are like, hey, we are building fortified and we're marketing it as a fortified home. Like, we have some builders right now that's part of our marketing of the house. I think we're able to differentiate that property from a property that's not, and so it's starting to just ask it's when you market something as, hey, I'm a builder who builds a fortified product.
Yeah.
You're now creating a conversation with the buyer. And now they're asking the questions, well, is this house fortified versus, and so that it is coming up and it's becoming more and more important. We're seeing it, it's happening where it's evolving and it's becoming something of value to the end user because it's reducing their costs ultimately.
Yeah. So those are the highlights of the fortified home program is coming out in June. You work with a contractor. We'll put some links on. You could reference the insurance.
Is that where I know you have like an inspection checklist that an inspector can do. And is that part of the fortified program, or is that a separate?
No, that's a separate thing. So usually right now, if the houses are older than a specific period of time, they want what they call a 4-point inspection.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that.
They're looking at roof age. Or do you have documents of how old that roof is? Again, be proactive in that. Trim your trees back off your roof. Roofs sometimes look older than they are. You can get a soft wash, but roof age, electrical age, Federal Pacific panels, stab block panels have got to go. They're not.
It used to be where it was recommended, but now if you have a Federal Pacific, you gotta have it changed before you get insurance.
Exactly.
I mean, there's no carrier out there that's gonna write it.
Not that I know of. I wouldn't even. I'm not even gonna honestly waste my time.
And if you're wondering what a Federal Pacific panel is, all you got to do is go look at your panel, and it's going to say Federal Pacific on it. It was a company that is no longer, because there were so many class action suits because they weren't tripping and creating a fire hazard.
Yeah.
And I mean, most of the houses in and around where our office is, West Bayou, East Bayou, they all had, and some of them still do have Federal Pacific. It doesn't mean that it's not going to work. However, when you go to sell it, you're going to have an issue with the inspection. You're going to have to have it changed out. And if you either disclose it up front,
yeah,
or let the buyer know that they're going to have to change it out, or you go ahead and change it out, it's usually better than what they're gonna ask for.
Well, and that goes back to, like, personally, like, if you have a house, I'm gonna pay to change that out because it's not safe.
Yeah,
you could just go Google Federal Pacific panels or stab block panels, and you can see all kind of instances of, you open the panel and there's black soot marks. I've definitely seen that.
What about aluminum wiring? Is that an issue with insurance?
Yeah, I would say aluminum wire. You used to be able to get it pigtailed, which is going from, I believe, at the switch or the
outlet.
The outlet, you go from aluminum to like a copper thing.
Yeah.
That is becoming more of an issue.
Because that's really the only solution.
Or to have a change. Yeah,
you can't really change out a whole old house. I mean, unless it's 4,000 square foot house, you can't. 2-story house, you can't rewire the whole house.
So if the market is restricted, like insurance companies, like, hey, we're only going to write.
You're just going to pay more.
Well, or you're not going to be able to get coverage because they're restricting the market based on options they can choose. They can choose to either do it or not. And at the end of the day, if you're trying to be most competitive house out there as possible,
even if you've updated it to adapt to,
if you have aluminum wiring, I would have to dig in and make sure it's going to be covered because we only have a handful of companies still that are running. Hopefully that opens up with the incentive program, which is the good news of what's going on. So anyway, we can start talking about that. So the incentive program has been awarded, I believe 42 million of the 45 million has been awarded.
Let's back up for people who don't know what you're talking about. What is the incentive program? What are you talking about?
So the Louisiana Department of Insurance created a program. It was a 45 million grant program to offer to insurance companies to, hey, come back and do business in Louisiana. Again, I'm not an expert on it.
But let's go back. What caused that, right? So in the last, 5 years, I mean, my understanding is we went from, literally dozens and dozens and dozens of different providers, and now we're down to a handful that everybody else left the state, not writing new policies.
Right.
And now we're left with a handful of companies. And so, our state, are the constituents have asked the state to step in and do something, and they don't provide the insurance. So they're trying to incentivize these companies to come back, right?
Correct. So we have lost a bunch of carriers. I forget the number. It's called between 9 and 12 in the last probably 18 months, right, left the state. But basically the reason is they weren't really charging enough premium for the risk associated with those premiums. And we had a couple of back-to-back bad hurricane seasons. You can't look at the Louisiana market by itself now. You have to kind of look at...
We also have Florida had a bad hurricane. We got fires in California.
Hailstorms in Texas.
Yeah. Harvey.
Flooding in Harvey. All of this impacts everything. Insurance is a risk pool. We're all in this together. The catastrophes
because all these insurance companies buy insurance.
Yeah.
And when the insurance company's insurance goes up, everybody's insurance goes up.
Yeah, so insurance companies buy reinsurance. So a big cost of insurance down here is reinsurance, but it's called catastrophe reinsurance. Now, I'm not an expert in this, but due to, what's going on in the world with everything, you could say the doom and gloom with the world, if you have $100 million you want to deploy, do you think that guy wants to deploy that to catastrophe reinsurance for the Gulf South and for the East Coast?
Right.
Or would you rather have that money deployed somewhere else? So that's what's kind of going on. The capacity for reinsurance is shrinking, and then so it's putting pressure on rates, and these insurance companies are paying out billions of dollars to everybody, not just Louisiana, so they have to make up that somehow in premiums.
Yeah, I mean, and I want who's insuring the reinsurance?
Yeah, nobody.
Probably China.
Yeah, no. So all the big reinsurance guys like Zurich and
Yeah.
the Liberty Mutuals and all the European guys are usually the reinsurance guys.
So let's get back to let's talk about how the state of the 45 million. What is that? And do you think it's going to help and give any relief?
I'm apprehensive, but hopefully it does work because from my understanding, here's how it works. So there's 45 million available for these insurance companies to take over. What happens if you're awarded, so say Allied Trust was awarded $6.5 million. Well, the Allied Trust has to match $6.5 million, and then they have to write double that amount of premium eligible. And there's certain criteria, like it has to be written in South Louisiana. So the program just got funded. So hopefully, as we move into maybe Q3 or Q4, barring any hurricane stuff, hopefully we'll see some. I don't think we're going to see rate relief, but maybe they're going to open up the market to get more properties eligible for the program. So, there's 45 million is a lot of premium, so you could do the math about what that should open up to be available for these insurance companies, right? And they just opened up the second incentive period. They awarded like 42 million. There's 45 million available. So there's another 3 million on the table for these companies to.
It just doesn't seem like a lot of money.
Well, if you double it, it is. Yeah. So if you take.
Because they're matching it.
Yeah. So if you take, so 6.5 million, so you took in 13 million and then double it. So what is that? I'm not a math whiz, but 26 million.
Yeah.
In premium. So that's a lot of premium. I mean, so hopefully we'll get some. I don't know if we're going to get rate relief, but if more companies are riding, it's going to be better. And hopefully, maybe into next year, if we don't have any hurricanes or anything, we'll start to see some downward pressure in rates. But I think it's going to be a longer road to recovery.
Right.
Being proactive, working with people doing the fortified loan program, especially on older houses.
It's improving construction, being proactive, attracting some of those companies back in.
Yeah.
And doing the things to help yourself with your house.
One thing, South Louisiana or just Louisiana in general is coming together for the greater good. And I think it's going to take realtors and insurance guys and builders all working together to improve the program and hey, why should we do business here?
Yeah.
And so I think it is going to be a longer road to recovery, but I definitely think it's possible. And with these programs that LDI put out and, working with people that are being proactive, I think we're generally going to move into a better market.
Right. And, there's other things too that we talk on almost every day and we're talking about, things, we fight with you on is well, you sell a house with a pool and it's got a slide and
no slides.
The client wants to keep the slide and it's that's a thing now. You're basically saying, dude, you got to take out your slide.
I'm not
zip lines, slides.
Yeah, slides.
Basically everything that's fun.
Dude, people do not want
trampolines.
Yeah, they don't want to give up their trampolines. They don't want to give up their slides, but you're gonna have to give those.
You're like the fun police.
I know.
Come on, dude.
It's not fun, but it's just it is what those insurance companies.
Now you can find people that will write those. You just gotta pay a little bit more,
or pay a little bit more. I mean, I think State Farm. Don't put but I think they'll insure trampolines and slides and stuff. Maybe Liberty Mutual, but basically anybody else, no go. They'll make you sign an exclusion for a trampoline, or you have to remove the slide. No slides, diving boards. Make sure your trees are cut back. I mean, all these things. But you should be talking to an agent, asking you questions up front. If you're asking me to quote a house, I'm looking at all this on the back end. I mean, luckily I still have a realtor, so I have access to MLS, but I'm going to Google Street View. I'm looking at Eagle Eye View. How does that roof look? Is it missing shingles?
Yeah.
Do the trees need to be cut back? I'm looking at all that up front before I even.
Well, and I think that's something that I've seen in practice with maybe unexperienced real estate agents and unexperienced buyers is where you can really get into a bind when you quote insurance with somebody who really doesn't care who you are or what's going on, and they give you a price, you buy the house, and most people don't realize that the insurance companies come back and do spot, inspections,
100%
drive-bys, and then literally you could have just bought a $200,000 house that maybe the roof was at the end of the life, but there was no problem and nobody really helped you address that issue and understand that your insurance could go up, and not only go up, the worst thing that could happen is you buy the house a few weeks later after you close on it, you get a letter from your insurance and saying you have to replace your roof or we're dropping you.
And that could have been prevented by talking to an agent that actually asking those questions or look, I know as annoying it may be, I'm going to tell you that stuff up front.
Well, there's some really good insurance agents in Lafayette, you being one of them, but we've got, our friend Travis McGrew, and, there's a lot of other people. They've got Terry Wolford, and those people really care about what's going to happen.
Right.
And they, I found like some of our clients may say, well, so-and-so is going to give me a better deal and they're going to write it. Well, that's because they don't understand the whole picture. So it's important when you're shopping for an insurance agent, just like a realtor, you really got to understand the whole picture, because yes, you might get a quote and it might be better than one of the guys that care about you. But at the end of the day, there's a reason. There's no way to have both cheap price and better coverage.
Well, just like anything, there's bad people, bad agents on doing insurance. But a big thing, like I've saved clients that we insure here, like, hey, Allstate was cheaper. I was like, yeah, but they put $100,000 in liability. It's a depreciated roof schedule. And then if you look at Allstate's a 6-month auto policy, I'm not singling out Allstate, but it actually wasn't better for the client to move to, even though the insurance policy was a little bit more by $200-$300. It didn't have a depreciated roof schedule. It had a lower hurricane deductible. So you need to, like,
I'm not saying you want the highest insurance quote, but
no,
you need to have the whole picture so that you can make those decisions and know what's happening. And in some cases, you can mitigate some of those costs by, adjusting and providing that information to the underwriter.
Yeah, correct. And being proactive. And this stuff. Exactly. One thing I'm seeing a lot more, I think is the cost of it has gone down, is like people like scoping, buying or selling side, people scoping the sewage pipes, like water and sewer backup. I think I personally did it at my house. It's $300 to do it. I had a clog in the air, but
$300 to $700. But I mean, it could be literally, we've seen it as high as $20,000 problems.
Yeah. So, but if you do that and you're listing or selling and you scope that pipe, so that's going to be an issue on either side of it, so you can address it up front. And yeah, nobody wants to do that, but those are the things that you're going to have to do to get the insurance policy, and you're going to prevent a big cost for the buyer or seller on that back end of doing that.
Yeah.
So just being more proactive and working with an agent, like, hey, I got this listing, we'll go look at it, commercial or residential, because same thing on the commercial side, and they're a lot more picky on the commercial side, so what are they looking at, and being proactive in everything you do, matters.
Well, we, with our property management company, we manage about 700 properties, and the insurance increase has significantly started to affect the bottom line of some of our investors, because, if their insurance goes up 25%, I mean, that's 25% straight off of their profit, right? So what we're noticing is, with the right advice, some of them are taking, if they have let's say 30 homes, 50 homes, or 50 doors is what we call them, they're refinancing, removing their debt to some of the higher end properties and getting insurance on those, and just self-insuring the rest of them. So if you have 30 homes and 10 of them are the ones that you really want to insure because you got a mortgage on it, well, you can move all the debt to those homes, insure those, and then the ones that maybe be 50, 60, 90,000, you can self-insure that, and you can save a lot of money.
Yeah, and you don't have to buy the wind and hail coverage is what the issue is. So you don't have, I would still probably buy insurance on everything but wind, hail, and hurricane coverage, and definitely have like some kind of general liability policy. But absolutely. But again, if you're an investor looking at a property, like, investors get mad at me all the time. Like, I've invested in property, I've learned a lot. And I don't want to tell people, but look at all the rehab costs up front. Like, does it need a new roof? Is there plumbing issues? Is that an extra $20,000-$25,000? You should be adding that all to the front end of the deal, to where if the deal makes sense, it's good to go. But if not, why would you want to have all these repair costs? All right. So include all your rehab costs up front when you're analyzing the deal to make sure it makes sense. And then you're probably going to have a better insurance rate on that property too.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I know investors get mad at me, but I'm telling the reality of everything, and it does make a difference. Like, hey, no, you're going to have to fix that. You're going to have to fix the roof. And then there are a lot, oh, well, I'm not going to have an issue on the back end of that insurance policy.
Yeah, no doubt.
You know, because we have to sell volume of premium to make any money in insurance. So for me to have an issue, I'd rather talk about all the difficult stuff up front, even though I may annoy some people about it. It's just better to talk about the obstacles up front. I mean, you know.
What else is good that's happening in the insurance?
So I think the incentive program coming out, you know, hopefully we'll see some markets open up in Q3, Q4, barring like any hurricane stuff. We have the Fortify Home program. We'll put some links up about that. But just being proactive. I think these are things that, you know, buyers can do, sellers can do, agents can do, and just working as a team, or a really good team, to be proactive and all this stuff. And I think hopefully we're going to see a trend to be better in the market.
Well, and you know, you talked about, like, you know, your job, and I know you because you're also a realtor too. You started as a real estate agent and then went into the insurance. Tell us about, since we've got some time, tell me about your journey. Tell us, like, how did you get into the insurance business, and a little bit about your background, because I know you do support the AVA heavily. I mean, you're a veteran yourself, and you know, tell us a little about your journey to becoming an insurance agent. And if somebody wanted to become an agent, how could they, you know, what should they do, and, you know, how can they get a hold of you? Were you looking for agents, or like how did you get into it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I joined the military. Of course, I graduated in 2002. I was already planning to join the military, but 9/11 happened, so me and a buddy joined. I joined the military, went to Iraq 0304 or 0405, came out, went to U.S.
As infantry, right?
Yeah, we were infantry. We were mechanized infantry. Then I came out, I went to UL, kind of graduated in 2008. And then I got out of the National Guard in 2010. But in 2000, I wanted to do real estate, right? If you look at Forbes list, you know, most of the guys on the Forbes list were all in real estate one way or another. But I really didn't know what was going on. It's 2008, right? What was that?
Right.
Financial crash.
Yeah.
So I decided, I actually applied to be, one of my friend's dads was the manager for the state of Louisiana for Liberty Mutual.
Mm-hmm.
So I applied. I actually got the position, but then the market crash happened. So Liberty Mutual was going to open up an office in Lafayette, Louisiana. So, hey, that's not going to happen. So I was like, I want to go do real estate anyway. So I got my realtor's license. I joined Cold.
I didn't know that. So you were going to go into insurance before you got your license, real estate?
Well, I was just kind of looking. I didn't know. I knew I needed to make some money. I didn't have a job or anything. So they were actually going to pay me, you know, a little bit of salary up front. But it was actually worked out in my favor, right? So I started doing real estate. I took a loan out from my grandma. I joined Caldwell Banker. Ken Simmerall was over there, and everything. But I did I was just strictly commercial. So that's what I did to 2008 to 2010.
So for 2 years you were in the real estate.
Yeah, I was just kind of helping people, trying to learn everything, and I learned a lot. But basically, you know, it's 2010 now. I wasn't really making any money. I took a loan out from my grandma, so. Again, you know, my friend's dad called me back like, hey, Liberty Mutual is going to open the office in Lafayette now. Do you want to do it? So I had to reapply and everything. And it actually worked out in my favor because I had been a realtor for 2 years. So I kind of knew what realtors were looking for. So Liberty Mutual at the time I was a direct or a captive carrier with them. All I wrote was Liberty Mutual, and they had phenomenal rates, higher end clients. And basically,
they came in Louisiana. They were like ready to write.
They were already in Baton Rouge and New Orleans heavily, but they really weren't in the western part of the state. So they were very competitive, very, very competitive. So I basically burned them into the market from, you know, 2010 to then I left in 2017. But you don't know what you don't know, right? And you know, and I learned as a realtor what they were kind of looking for. So all I did was work for realtors and
So your bread and butter was really, you know, tailored to realtors, supporting realtors, helping them with their deals, you know, inspecting their roofs before.
Flood insurance was my bread and butter, but I don't think any agent was doing that at the time. You know, I think more agents do it now because honestly, I'd rather work with realtors because before like a home lender or anything. So I was just specifically targeting realtors. And then, the whole insurance started changing, and I just saw an opportunity to start my own office. So that's kind of what I did.
Yeah, and so you started your own office, and now I know you've got a few agents in your office, some staff members, and if somebody was thinking about getting into insurance, what would you tell them? What would you tell yourself back in 2000?
Oh, it's
12.
Go independent. Find a good local independent office. There's huge opportunities in insurance. The insurance industry is,
Why independent? Like, what's the difference?
because why write for one carrier? It just really doesn't make sense.
It's kind of like being a broker. You can write all of the carriers versus just if you work for Liberty Mutual, you can only write Liberty Mutual. If you work for State Farm, you can only write State Farm.
And that water is a little bit muddy because all these captive carriers, like the original State Farms and All States and Nationwide and Travelers, they've kind of expanded to allow their agents to write some other products just because the natural progression of the market. But if you're independent, we have pretty much all the insurance companies that we would want that have that can write in the market. So instead of one company, we represent a bunch. That goes for the personal or the business side. So we're able to get hopefully more competitive quotes with better coverage for our clients rather than a captive carrier. I mean, that's not always the case, but why write for one company when you could write for a bunch?
Yeah.
And there's actually probably the average age in the insurance industry is probably, beyond 60. So there's definitely opportunities, commercial and personal.
Yeah.
And insurance really isn't going anywhere. You have to have insurance, business, personal sides, and really opportunities for it for a good career.
Yeah. Well, and what's different than in real estate? I mean, let's face it, we have to sell houses no matter over and over again.
Yes.
Whereas with insurance, you can have some residual from just if you're servicing and managing that customer experience, it is most likely going to re-sign up with you the next year.
Yeah, hopefully. So our office, we make our money on our renewals.
Yeah.
So absolutely. But you have to write, again, just like anything
else. I mean, there's times like this and everybody's shopping because all of their, I know it's, some years, but in the past it's easier than others. But I would imagine this year's got to be one of the hardest for all insurance companies because like literally people are shopping.
Yeah, we definitely get beat up on the phone. I'll definitely get beat up on the phone today. But premiums are increasing, but policy count's kind of going down. So there's a balance of it, right? And then, the most shocking thing to me is like, it doesn't really matter how good your client experience is. Premium is premium. So you're seeing a lot of, other agents come in and cut coverage and premiums, and people are leaving because it's cheaper. But it's not necessarily better, no matter how good that client experience was, which is kind of frustrating. So that's why we're trying to do, more business insurance, because that doesn't seem to happen because it's treated like a commodity when it's really not. You need to have a good agent that actually cares about you and your family. Like, I understand saving money, but sometimes it's not in your best case. And all too often, I'm seeing agents cut coverage to get a new client in the door, but you know what, maybe that's not our client, and I want a client that actually knows that we care about them. And we look at every single renewal, like we track everything in Excel and track all of our numbers, and we actually care about our client. But yeah, I mean, it is good, but right now it's I'm not a negative person, but getting beat up daily for about a year now is very
because the rates are going up and
we just have to have difficult conversations with people, and people just don't like to have difficult conversations, which I understand. But I'm here, like, I try to give them, like today, we painted a good picture about hopefully, the market turning around, some positives coming out of the market. And I think if you work with an agent that just discusses all this up front with you, it's going to be better.
So I know you work with a lot of realtors. Like, if you're talking to the realtors, what would you want to tell them to, how you work and what you can do for them?
Yeah, so I'd like to back to being proactive. Like, if you're going into a listing appointment, you can text us, call us, like check the flood zone ahead of time so if you're going into that listing appointment, to ask for all that information about, flood declarations page, an elevation certificate, a copy of their policy. If that roof looks good, when was it replaced? Do you have documentation from that?
Right.
And what's really, starting to be interesting to see is like a lot of these, go pull permits. Like, I'm telling realtors now, like, if you're doing a project, you're doing a flip, go pull a permit. because we have these insurance companies.
What is it?
So the insurance companies are saying like, hey, they can see if you pulled an electrical permit. So they're saying, hey, you updated something in 2012. So that's for sure.
I see. It's documenting it.
Documenting upgrades
Because the insurance companies are seeing those permits.
Yeah. So
I didn't know that.
if you're flipping a house, keep all those receipts. Put those on MLS. Like, hey, we upgraded the windows, we changed the electrical, the panel, the room. But we have documentation for all that. And I think more and more those are going to be really, really important documents that you can verify the updates to that home, especially if it's an older house. So being proactive in that approach, if on a listing side. And then same thing, if you're a buyer's agent, just being proactive, like if they really like the house, getting the insurance quote maybe ahead of time, and just talking about all these things with the agent and the buyers about issues, like trim those trees back and all these things. But be proactive, listing or buying side, be proactive is the best thing, especially, and that goes for business.
Be proactive, engage with your insurance agent.
Yeah, don't
wait.
Don't sleep.
That's the worst. It's like, 3 or 4 days before closing and we get a call saying, yeah, we don't have insurance and we can't close. I mean, be proactive as far as, do it early, make sure you're comfortable, especially during the due diligence period, and then, work with you guys. Like we work with you all the time.
Don't be afraid to call us. Like I had a couple calls last week. A senior agent went out of her way to help a newer agent. She was the selling agent. The other agent was the buyer's agent. I think she was just afraid to pick up the phone. So that agent stepped up to get the deal done, to make these calls. So just be proactive. Don't be afraid to call us. We're definitely here to help. I'm here to create lifetime value for.
So tell us, like, who's in your office right now? What's the structure? How many agents do you have? Who's going to pick up the phone when they call your office or your cell?
So if you call me, I'm going to answer. But we have Charlotte who runs the office.
Not all the time.
Not
sometimes. Like I call your cell and Charlotte answers.
Yeah, because like how that happens, I'm always on the phone. So I have a couple of different numbers, but Charlotte actually runs my whole office. I'm new business development, talking to realtors. I'm a salesman, right? So Charlotte actually runs the office. We have Camille is running renewals right now, and then Matt, he's my new agent. He's kind of really doing all our personal insurance quotes and everything. I kind of oversee everybody, but that's kind of the structure set up right now. But Charlotte's the boss of me, but she tells me what to do, and then she handles everybody. But we're here to help.
Well, and what's next for Kastner?
Hey, if you are an agent, interested in being an agent, we could definitely do an agent. But I want to grow, but I want to grow the right way and the right team. We had this office since 2017. I feel like finally I have a great team. Yeah. Kind of set up how everything I want. So I'm excited to see the progression of it. Camille's been a really good value add. Taking Charlotte and making her run the office has been good. So I can focus on what I like doing, is talking to people and writing new business and policies.
It's generating. You're the rainmaker for the company.
Exactly. I would like to have other agents, so I'm not the sole provider for the office, but.
So how many agents do you want to have in the next 5 years?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'd probably like to expand maybe to Houston or to another market, but at least a couple. I would like to take some pressure off me, and I think we've had some agents in the past that haven't worked out, but I think Matt Dugas, which is one of my current agents, is probably one of the most favorite agents we've had that come up through our program. But at least a handful. I would like I said, I would like to take the pressure off me a little bit so I can do more business development, more marketing type stuff in the future.
Well, I know you're passionate about the Veterans Association.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that. What's next? What's the next event? And if somebody wants to, participate, how do they do?
So me and Andrew Ward, a guy I served with, started the Acadian Veteran Alliance back in COVID. I think this is our third year going on. We have a social May 25th on Thursday. We'll double check that.
I just had that bourbon. That was cool.
That was the bourbon event. Yeah, it was a great event. So we have a social, I think this Thursday coming out. But
what's the mission?
So we have three main pillars of missions: the work program, the heal program, and the give program. Really, our bread and butter is that heal program. We give what they call like an SGB injection to help veterans with PTSD.
What is that? What kind of injection?
Man, I'm gonna butcher it. It's a stellate ganglion block. So it's an injection. It's an outpatient injection into your
neck.
Basically, your brain set. I don't want to butcher it, but it does go through your neck, but the best description I have is like veterans felt like their mind was, think of Manhattan at gridlock, and then we have veterans coming after saying it felt like they were standing in the middle of Arizona in a desert. So that's their mind. Mine went from the Manhattan at gridlock to standing out. Families are thrown. Yeah, it's changing people's lives. So that's the main thing we're focused on. But we do have a work program trying to help veterans get work through job placement, helping them with their resumes and everything. We have that, and then the Give program where we give back to other organizations within Acadiana and stuff. So we have a social coming up May 25th. It's at Corner Bar from 5:30 to 7. So if you guys, you don't have to be a veteran, just come check out. We're just trying to help people.
Yeah, because I mean, if I'm not a veteran, but you guys, it's a great mission.
Yeah,
you're helping our veterans here locally, and anybody can participate.
Yeah, absolutely. So
if they want to find out more about y'all's events and what the how to donate and how they can help, where they
supportava.org.
supportava.org. And if somebody wants to join your team or learn more about Kastner Insurance or shop their current plans, where do they go?
You can send an email to info@kastnerig.com. So that's Kastner, KASTNER.com. info@kastner.com.
And it's Levi like the jeans.
Levi like the jeans.
And Levi, thank you, man. Appreciate you coming in again this year. And
absolutely.
Hopefully next time we talk, we'll have some better news.
All good.
Guys, no storms this year.
No storms this year. The cheapest, man. At a cheaper rate.
Thank you, brother.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it, man.